Even though there may be some confusion, I think the overall point is that people are aware now that there are investments available outside of traditional stocks and bonds.
This is 401k Specialist Editor-in-Chief Brian Anderson, and this is the 401k Specialist Podcast. Today we're going to be talking about two of the biggest forces reshaping retirement plans right now, private markets and artificial intelligence, and what participants actually think about them. New research from Invesco shows growing demand for both, but with some important guardrails around risk, cost, and human oversight. We're going to dive right into it right after this quick message.
Discover the latest insights from Invesco's Defined Contribution Participant Pulse Survey, exploring the behaviors, concerns, and preferences of large DC plan participants across the United States. Explore the findings at Invesco.com/DC research. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.
Invesco's most recent DC Participant Pulse Survey found that 80% of participants would be comfortable allocating a slice of their retirement savings to private market alternatives, and more than half are already using AI-powered tools. To really dive into these insights and what they mean for retirement plan advisors and sponsors, we're happy to welcome back Greg Jenkins, Managing Director, DC Solutions at Invesco. Greg, good to have you back on the 401k Specialist Podcast.
Thanks, Brian. It's great to be on today.
All right, well, to begin, can you tell us a little bit about the scope of the latest Participant Pulse Survey? What's the primary objective here?
Sure. So Invesco's been doing participant research since 2007, and the body of work now includes over 25 surveys, dozens of focus groups and interviews. And our most recent Participant Pulse Survey was conducted with our research partner Ipsos in the fall of 2025. And we cover, as you said, private markets and AI. We surveyed over 500 plan participants from all income levels and geographies in the U.S. So just regular people. It definitely wasn't a high net worth survey.
Right. Okay. Now, you asked respondents at the beginning of the survey how familiar they were with private investments. What did they say? And do they really understand what you mean when you talk about private markets?
Yeah, this is interesting. So in the beginning of the survey, without much background information, we asked people about their familiarity with private markets, and 72% said they were either very familiar or somewhat familiar with private market investments. With millennials, the number was even higher, about 79%. We also included a write-in box so respondents could tell us what the term meant to them. In a nutshell, there was quite a bit of variation. Some had clearly seen or heard about private markets from the wealth space, perhaps. Some mentioned rental property, some cited crypto, and others said investments that were not controlled by the government. So quite a wide variety of answers. Even though there may be some confusion, I think the overall point is that people are aware now that there are investments available outside of traditional stocks and bonds.
Right. It's definitely getting a lot of attention over the last year. Now, the survey found that people were very open to private market investments as long as they were contained in vehicles like target date funds and managed accounts rather than as standalone investment options. It seems to kind of reinforce the importance of defaults and guided solutions. Does being more specific with these kind of options help participants buy into private market investments?
That's a great question, Brian. And I want to be clear, first of all, that Invesco doesn't advocate using private markets as standalone investments in DC plans. And really, no one in the industry is calling for that. But in general, we found participants to be cautiously optimistic about, or cautiously enthusiastic, I guess, about private markets being included in retirement plans, but even more positive when we specifically said they would be part of target date funds or managed accounts. Only about 20% were negative on that concept in both cases, and that group was made up almost entirely of baby boomers.
Okay. Well, in that Pulse survey, investors were categorized as conservative, moderate, and aggressive. What type of investors showed the most interest in private markets?
Yeah, this was one of the surprises in the study, Brian. In the beginning of the survey, we asked participants to describe themselves as conservative, moderate, aggressive, as you mentioned, and we've done that in many of our surveys over the years. The group that was most positive about private markets and DC plan were the moderate investors. The other thing that was a little surprising is that 88% of millennials identified themselves as conservative or moderate investors. which is, I think, different than your intuition might tell you.
Okay. Now, one of the things that I kind of find interesting is that Invesco does a lot of language research, testing words and phrases to see which ones resonate best with participants. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you're looking for here and what you found?
Yeah, we have done a lot of research on that, Brian. This one will take a little explaining. So many in the industry know us for our financial language research. We've been doing it for many years. In this survey, we also tested language around private markets. And the goal is to find words or phrases that connect with participants, help them to feel confident and positive. We also try to identify trouble areas or words to avoid. And even if private markets are only a small portion of a target date fund or a managed account, we still need to communicate that. So it's important that we find the right words and we find the right balance here. Let participants know what's in the portfolio without flooding them with technical information. That tends to turn people off and make them feel bad. So we tested a number of words on this topic. Words like long term and growth and opportunity, those are positive. Those are always powerful words. And we've seen that before. What didn't and I want to say too that words like growth, even conservative investors, they still want growth and opportunity. So that's an important thing to remember. What didn't score as well is generic descriptors like diversifiers. We see that word used in the UK or Australia and DC plans. That really wasn't enough for American investors, or simply private markets. People wanted more information on what they're investing in. And then we have the word alternatives, which is a disliked term by most people. We've tested that before. And I guess in defense of alternatives, I'll say that it went from despised to just disliked. So it was a little better, but still not a word that we want to use when we're talking about private markets and DC plans.
Interesting. Very interesting. All right. So, in doing all this research, what specific types of private markets tend to be, which ones are more appealing to people?
Yeah, this is also interesting. We found that people tend to feel most comfortable with private markets investments related to tangible assets. So things like real estate, property, infrastructure, that seemed to strike a chord better than some others. Meanwhile, private debt or private credit seemed to be misunderstood, which shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, words like debt and credit are not positive things for most people. But I think this will be a challenge for the industry since many think that private credit will be an important asset class for DC plans in the future. And so we're planning to do more work on this in our next survey and hope to come up with some ideas. But there's definitely work to do.
Right, right. All right. Now let's switch gears a little bit. Now, regarding the AI section of the Pulse survey, were there any surprises in the responses and any reasons for encouragement?
Yeah, there's a couple things that were really interesting. Overall, people feel like AI is coming. So that was pretty universal. Everyone thinks that human oversight is important. So almost everyone said in different questions said that they thought having a human element added to AI was going to be the most powerful when it comes to retirement planning. Another thing we found is that when you talk about AI in general, you get a fairly positive response. But when you start to ask about specific challenges or problems people have and ask them if they thought AI might be able to help, that's when we got much more positive responses. So, for instance, when we asked about determining a Roth contribution or setting initial contribution rate or setting up a retirement withdrawal program, when we asked people specifically about those challenges, they were much more positive on AI, with only about 25% or so saying not very interested or not at all interested. And what's interesting is we can look on the survey and we can see individuals. We don't know what their names are, but we can see how they responded to questions. And people that were negative on AI overall actually said yes when we asked them about specific challenges, like, again, determining a Roth contribution or the right amount for that. So I think that's encouraging for AI, but it gives us a clue on how we may want to communicate that when we start using AI more in retirement plans. In terms of concerns, data privacy and security was by far the biggest concern. And that scored higher with older participants, so older Gen X and boomers, and also with women. So the industry's got some work to do to help people understand the data privacy and security policies that are going to be in place for these types of things.
Right. Okay. Well, it sounds like how you communicate with participants about AI really, really matters. Before we wrap up, I quickly want to mention that we do have a link to the Invesco DC Participant Pulse Survey that we've been talking about on the homepage for this podcast, so you can check it out for yourself. All right, so Greg Jenkins, Managing Director, DC Solutions at Invesco. Thanks so much for joining us today on the 401k Specialist Podcast.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Discover the latest insights from Invesco's Defined Contribution Participant Pulse Survey, exploring the behaviors, concerns, and preferences of large DC plan participants across the United States. Explore the findings at Invesco.com/DC research. Invesco Distributors, Incorporated.